right. Well, Rhythm Church, it is great to see you guys today. I hope you are doing good. I hope you're feeling nice and warm and toasty in this room, since that is definitely not the case outside today. My name is Corey. I am the lead pastor here, and I'm very excited about today. We are continuing in a sermon series we've been in for the last few weeks now called Rattle, which I'm excited about that. But I'm also excited because, as you can see, we are going to have a few baptisms after service, and those are always some of my favorite Sundays, so I hope you guys stay after to hang out and see that. But this series, Rattle, is based on a passage that we see in the book of Ezekiel, in Ezekiel 37. And in this passage, God is talking to the prophet Ezekiel, and he says, hey, go and prophesy over these bones. And so there's this valley full of dry bones, and so Ezekiel goes and he prophesies, and then all of a sudden it says that he hears a rattling noise, and these bones start coming together bone to bone, and they rise up in front of him as a vast army. And so really that's the image that we are looking at for this year. For this year, we want to see God do the same thing. We want to see him breathe new life into Rhythm and bring new power into Rhythm and what we are doing here. And in order to do that, we want to pray for power, and we want to plan with purpose. So there are a few commitments that we have talked about making as a church. The first one is we committed to gather. So we're going to gather here weekly, prioritizing that. Last week we talked about we want to commit to grow. So we want to take advantage of the opportunities for spiritual growth in front of us. And this week, we want to talk about how we should commit to give. So if you have a Bible, go ahead and turn to Acts chapter 9. We're going to start at verse 36, and we're going to work our way to verse 42. So it starts like this. Acts 9:36. It says, in Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha, which is translated Dorcas. Now, let's pull off to the side of the road just for a moment. If you listen to this sermon and you are moved and you think, man, when I have a daughter, I want her to be named after this character, may I suggest Tabitha and not Dorcas? Okay, and that's no offense to the Dorcases or the Dorcai out there. It's just Tabitha's got a better ring to it, all right? So that's a little housekeeping. Now we can move forward. The rest of verse 36 says that she was always doing good works and acts of charity. So Tabitha had a reputation. She was known for certain things. And the same thing is true of all of us, for good or for bad. Our name is associated with certain things. We have a reputation that we carry around. If you've met my wife, she's got a reputation for being obsessed with Disney, for loving German shepherds and loving the scriptures. All of that is great. If you've met Jim Anderson before, tall, bald, he has a reputation for being a hopeless Dallas Cowboys fan. He also has a reputation for being the guy that you go to if you want to know the best places to eat within a 30-mile radius. He knows them. If you know Dee and Roger Pierce, they are slowly gaining a reputation for having the best monster cookie bars ever. So I'm just going to get them to start making sure that they bring that every week, not for you guys, just for me, so that I can take those home as a gift. But we're all known for certain things, and Tabitha was known primarily for two things. She was known for her good works and her acts of charity. Another way that you could say that is Tabitha was known for the way that she gave her time and her treasure. She was known for what she did with her minutes and her money. See, the reality is that we all give. It's not a matter of if we give, it's just a matter of where we give. If you want to do a little heart check, all you got to do is look at where you spend your time and where you spend your treasure. Because it's easy to say, well, I can't commit to gather every week at the church. I mean, that's a lot of time. I don't know that I have that time. But then your phone is like, hey, by the way, you spent 4 hours and 21 minutes looking at me last week. And you're like, no one asked you, phone. It's easy to say, well, I can't give much of anything and still stay afloat. But then you go look at the bank account, and it's like, actually, you spent $122 on Taco Bell this last quarter. You spent $125 a month on the best sports package you could find just so that you could watch Kirk Cousins throw a check down pass with the season on the line in HD. Maybe spent $200 on some coffee at Starbucks. I mean, the reality is that we all give. And same thing for me. There are times where I will look at our budget. I kind of do that for our family, and I'll go, how are we short? We're $50 short for the rest of this month. What happened? And then I start going through the bank account, and I'm like, ooh, that was me. That was me. That was also me. Can't tell Kara that, though. I just tell her, hey, someone has clearly hacked our account and has started going to unhealthy food places, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it. But the thing is if we want to know where our heart is, we look at the way we give our time, the way we give our treasure, because the way we spend our time and treasure reveals our heart. And in Tabitha's case, it revealed her love for God and her love for God's people. We don't know what all of that entailed, but the text, as it goes on, gives us a glimpse of what some of that looked like. Picking back up in verse 37, it says, about that time, Tabitha became sick and died. Now, I know that escalated quickly, but that's part of the story. After washing her, they placed her in a room upstairs. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples heard that Peter was there and sent 2 men to him who urged Peter, don't delay in coming with us. So Peter got up and went with them. When he arrived, they led him to the room upstairs, and all the widows approached him, weeping and showing him the robes and clothes that Dorcas had made while she was with them. So this wonderful lady with a wonderful reputation passes, and the people are very upset about this, so they send for Peter. Now, I think the reason they sent for Peter is probably because Peter was an apostle. He was part of the inner 3 when it came to his relationship with Jesus. And so Peter had some sort of extra supernatural gift, some sort of miraculous type gift. In fact, if you look in the book of Acts, there are times where it says that Peter's shadow fell upon people and they were healed. Or the Apostle Paul says that the sweat from his rag would heal people, which is kind of gross, but you got to do what you got to do. And so I think they are calling Peter because they're thinking he is the guy that's going to be able to help us revive her if needed. And so Peter shows up, and it says the widows approached him, weeping and showing him the robes and clothes that Dorcas had made while she was with them. And so right there, we get a glimpse of what some of those good deeds and those acts of charity looked like. She was providing clothes for these widows who were poor and who were in need. And she did this to such a degree that the thought of her being gone wrecked this community. They were upset about this because they had grown to love her, and they were upset about it because you're left with the practical question of, well, who's going to do this now? Who's going to provide for us now that she's gone? And the reason I think that Tabitha did this, and something that we should know, is that the way we spend our time and treasure can have an eternal impact. It can have an eternal impact. And she knew that, so she spent time investing in the kingdom, in eternity. Now, I'm not a money guy. My brother is the money guy in our family. He graduated with a master's in finance while I am currently in school learning about the social and historical context of the New Testament and how that plays out in our interpretation of it. So we are not the same, but I still have some basic ideas. So if you are investing in something, the goal is that you are investing now so that you can benefit later. You're investing now so that you can benefit later. When you look at Tabitha's life, I believe that's part of what she was doing. She was investing now with her time and her treasure, pouring into these widows, pouring into this community in need. And it didn't matter whether she saw that return shortly, whether she was here or not, or whether she was going to see the results of that far on into eternity. She was investing because she wanted a greater return. And she knew that the best return was going to come from her investments in the kingdom. See, when we invest in the kingdom, our return is not necessarily dollars and cents. Our return is the fruit of transformed lives. We invest and then we get to see how God uses us to transform people. And when we change our mindset that way, it sort of swings the doors wide open on what God may do or what God may ask of us. I mean, I've seen people do some crazy things just because God told them to, and they knew the return was going to be worth it. I know someone who drained their entire savings account, and they gave it to the church. Everyone thought she was crazy. She was my mom. Single mom. Drained it. I know someone who took the majority of their retirement and gave it away to a friend and a family that fell on really hard times. That was my dad. I have these examples of faith in my life that I'm so grateful for. I've known people who have served as volunteers in youth ministry for 20 plus years, investing week after week, hour after hour, because they knew the return was worth it. I know people who have pastored churches without making a dime. Unfortunately, I'm not smart enough to do anything else, so I got to get paid here. I know people who have spent hours in prayer on their knees, begging God for change and for revival, and those prayers have sustained me in rhythm and probably you over time. I know people who, when I worked at a church in Atlanta, they would go outside on the coldest day, maybe not quite as cold as this, but still got pretty cold there. But they'd go outside when it was cold and when it was raining, and they would run through the parking lot and meet someone at their car with an umbrella just so they can make sure that they walked them in and they stayed dry, and they didn't care about catching a cold or whatever it was. I know people who have given their car away to someone because God told them to. My first car was given to me for free by somebody just because God told them to. I know people who have left the comfort of their homes to be missionaries in foreign countries. I know a family who served in the youth ministry, and we reached some of the foster community in that area, and they decided to foster and adopt one of the teenagers. So she started as a student, and then she ended as a daughter. And all of these things are really, really cool if you're a Christian, but if you're not, you're kind of like, well, why would anyone do that? That sounds wild at best. It sounds foolish at worst. But people do that kind of stuff because our investments in the kingdom have the greatest return. And they wanted to see how they could make an impact. And so for us at Rhythm, I believe that God wants to do great things this year. I hope you believe that too. I've talked to many people that feel like there's a stirring of some kind happening. But if we want to see that happen, we got to commit to give. We have to commit to give our time in volunteering, being a part of the church. We have to commit to give our finances to allow the church to do ministry effectively. We have to commit to do those things. Because if you think about it, those things help sustain a church. A volunteer base helps sustain a church. It's like the core of the church. In fact, yesterday I threw out my back. I got a lot of ibuprofen going through my veins right now. But I threw out my back. I was deadlifting, and I was trying to max out, and I cranked the bar up and tweaked it, and I had to drop the bar. No, I'm just kidding. I actually bent over to put some sugar in the cabinet, and it went out, you know. I was like, dang it. Man, I should have done something different. I knew I should have squatted. But it's the core of the church. When the core is not intact, the rest of it doesn't function properly. And so if we don't have a strong volunteer base, then the rest of what God may be trying to do through Rhythm is not going to be possible. And so those things are crucial. It's crucial. I mean, we have so many things that we want to do. We want to continue to invest in kids and students and young families. We want to continue to build up our worship team. Sometimes people will ask me, or people will mention, one of the things that drew us to Rhythm was the music. And I'm like, that's awesome. And they'll ask, and they're kind, but they'll be like, hey, do you think that we're ever going to have like a full band again? And I'm like, I don't know. As soon as you sign up, then maybe we can. Because sure, we want to do those things, but ultimately we need the people. One of the big events we used to do as a church was called Rock the Block. And it's something that people still talk about and they love. In fact, I did a funeral this past week, and this family has moved out of state, and they've been gone for 5 or 6 years now. And I was sitting down talking to the family, and they brought up Rock the Block. I can't remember what it was called, but he's like, yeah, that event where we do all the inflatables and all this stuff. I mean, these were memorable things, and that's something I would love to do again. But an event like that is expensive to pull off. And right now, we can't necessarily do that. We want to, but we got to get to that point. In fact, we put together a finance team recently, and Dennis Meiskin leads it. And so he's been helping us, create the budget and helping us look at stuff. And we determined that the minimum amount to function, sort of just bare minimum function here, would be $16,500 a month. That allows us to pay the rent, the utilities, the staff, the bills, all that kind of stuff. And currently, at least when the last time I looked, this month we had brought in $11,437. Now, a lot of people give on Sundays, so let's just round it up. Let's say 13,000, which is awesome. It's amazing. But there's still a lot of room to grow. There's still things that we would like to do as a church, and we need to be able to give as a church and to step up as a church. Towards the end of this last year, our reserves, our cash reserves, had dropped below $1,000. And so we were sort of hanging on, waiting for the next year, believing God, moving forward. But that's not necessarily where we want to be. We don't want to operate on a bare bones sort of thing. We want to be able to do effective ministry and not be held back. And we want to make sure that we have what we need to do that. And so we got to step up and commit to give. And let me say that applies for myself and Kara as well. There's never going to be a time where I ask you to do something that I am not willing to do myself. In all the events we've done, we did trunk or treat, we did our Thanksgiving meals, we did Christmas toys. Every time we did that, me and Kara signed up because we wanted to make sure we were contributing. Every month, me and Kara give 10% right back into Rhythm. And that's not necessarily a demand tithing is mostly an Old Testament concept. I don't know that there's an exact percentage. As you move into the New Testament, you can determine that for yourself. But I grew up doing that. And so that's what we do. And we want to invest in the church. And so, again, I'm just saying that to say we are all in this together. We are all committing to give our time and to give our treasure so that we can see the kingdom built, so that we can see God return and bring great things. We want to see God do awesome things. And the thing is, like in this story, Tabitha provided for these widows in their need. And we don't know if someone else stepped up. I mean, we don't know if she had a thing going where they had a team of people or if it was just her. But regardless, these widows relied on Tabitha. They depended on Tabitha. And the thing is, when it comes to Mason City, there are people that depend on Rhythm Church. There are wonderful churches in this area. I've met some of the pastors, great people. But every church is unique, and every church has its own DNA, its own footprint. And Rhythm is unique in that sometimes we are able to reach people that not everyone else can. We're able to reach people in the midst of their addictions. We're able to meet people in the midst of their depression. We're able to meet people who haven't stepped in the church in a long time. They're not really sure if they're going to again. I mean, that's a benefit of this place, is that we see God reach people that won't necessarily walk into just anywhere. We had our prayer night on Wednesday, and we kind of took some time just to be silent and to listen and to allow God to speak. And I really felt in that moment, I just felt this weight on me for those who are trapped in depression and despair, or hounded by suicidal thoughts. It just hit me like a wave. Because I've talked to so many people lately that are dealing with those things. And I just was praying for them. And as I was praying, I was like, thank God that at Rhythm, those people can come in and hopefully know that they don't have to leave their baggage at the door. That they can come in just with all of their crud and all of their struggles, and they can just be loved. They can be cared for. I mean, I've had people come up to me and talk to me about their addictions, and I had one guy that, came up and was super excited, and he said, hey, I've been coming here for a little bit now, and it's really helped with my addiction, and he used some colorful language as well, which I always enjoy a little bit, because I'm like, oh, okay, so we're just going to be real here, huh? And he said, hey, I've been 10 days sober. And his eyes were just lit up. I mean, so pumped. And so was I. I mean, I could have picked him up and, crowd surfed him along like he had just won the game-winning kick at the Super Bowl or something. I mean, I was so excited for him. And that's the kind of stuff that happens here. That's the kind of footprint that we have here. Those are the kind of people that we are able to reach that not everyone can. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. Because like I've said before, God does not call those who change. He changes those he calls. If God saves us, truly, he will transform us. And we can take the hard path or we can move along with the Spirit. But to come to Christ is just we come with all of our stuff. And so there are people that uniquely are a part of Rhythm, that depend on Rhythm. And so that's why our commitment to give is so important. We are giving to serve Jesus first and foremost, and to serve those who are going through difficult times or those that are trying to commit to grow like we talked about last week, or those that aren't sure about the church, or maybe those that have been in the church a long time, but things have grown a little stale. We are trying to reach everyone that we possibly can. And if we're going to do that, we have to step out in faith. We have to play our part. And hopefully the goal of that is that when God restores things, when he begins changing lives, hopefully word gets out and God gets glory. See, look at the last few verses here. It says, Peter sent them all out of the room. He knelt down, prayed, and turning toward the body said, Tabitha, get up. She opened her eyes, saw Peter, and sat up. He gave her his hand and helped her stand up. He called the saints and the widows and presented her alive. Look at this last verse. And this became known throughout Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. That's the goal. That God would do something so great, so wonderful, so godlike, that his name gets glorified in Mason City. That the work that he is doing in people's lives begins to travel, and they go, wow, maybe this God is real. Maybe God is moving. Oh, that we would see a move of God because of our commitment to dig in, to gather, to grow, to give. And so again, we're praying for power,